Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, where I will be talking about inheritance tax for UK expats. So a very important one today. Hopefully I'll be able to share some wisdom with you. I think I generally say at most of these webinars that the information provided today is a guide. Of course, your individual circumstances need to be assessed. So please take it for what it is, a guide information, and then maybe this is sort of the issue that you want to look at a little bit deeper, then get in contact. So a quick intro. My name is Matt Penfold. I'm advisor and director here at Fiduciary Wealth Management. Fiduciary Wealth Management, we're a wealth management firm, as the name clearly says. We are based here in Gibraltar. But really, we cover kind of four key areas: the UK, Gibraltar, Spain, and Portugal. We do have clients in other areas in Europe and beyond. And if that's you, reach out. I'm sure we can still help you. But those are our core areas. And generally, we work closely with UK expats, those who've generally spent their life in the UK and moved elsewhere, or kind of transit, moving between countries. So today I'm going to be talking about inheritance tax. And this can be a complicated issue that this webinar won't cover every detail, but it should guide you in the right way. So firstly, you need to be mindful of inheritance tax in the UK, which we'll get to a little later, and then inheritance tax in your new country of residence. And it's complicated in the sense that these are assessed in different ways. To give you a practical example, in the UK, inheritance tax is paid by the estate. In Spain, inheritance tax is paid by the beneficiary. So there's a difference there, difference on how it's assessed and the allowances and that. So firstly, you need to understand inheritance tax rules in your own country and where you reside or where you're planning to reside. So I think this is a useful webinar, not only for those currently living outside of the UK, but those who are planning to relocate out to the UK, and maybe there's some kind of planning you can do before you relocate and when you arrive in your new country of residence. So when we talk about the rules of your new country outside of the UK, of course, it depends on that country. So I will cover the three countries I mentioned earlier: Gibraltar, Spain, and Portugal. Gibraltar, very simple. There's no inheritance tax here. You only have to be concerned about the UK, which again, I'll get to later. I keep saying that because just because you've relocated out of the UK does not mean that you're not still liable for UK inheritance tax. In fact, you will be in almost every case. So pay attention to that part a little bit later. Then we move across the border into Spain. So Spain, it's succession tax, which is assessed in the way as gift tax. Gift tax is something you've got to be aware of. So in the UK, a lot of people plan around the 7-year rule. You gift to your beneficiaries, and as long as you survive 7 years or more, then there's no inheritance tax. But Spain, you've got to be mindful that there's a gift tax. So you make that gift trying to plan around UK inheritance tax, but Spain may tax on that gift and an inheritance you receive. Now, it does depend on a few different factors. It depends the gift or the inheritance, who that is from, and where those assets are located. It also depends on what region of Spain that you live in. So you may be aware that in Spain, taxes are often split between the kind of state control taxes and the regional taxes. And when it comes to inheritance or gift tax in Spain, this is controlled by the region that you live in. So as an example, in Andalusia, if you receive an inheritance from a direct ascendant or descendant, then there's a 99% allowance, effectively saying you only pay tax on 1% of that, which is wonderful. So again, that's great news. You still need to be mindful of UK inheritance tax, which we'll cover later. In Portugal, they abolished inheritance tax or succession tax, as it's called in Iberia. They do have what they call imposto de selo, excuse the pronunciation, which is a stamp duty of sorts, which is 10%. But again, it depends on who you are gifting to. If you are gifting, the beneficiary is a parent, grandparent, child, grandchild, then there's no imposto de selo, no inheritance tax, no gift tax, no stamp duty. So that's great news in Portugal. The one thing to be mindful is stepchildren. At the moment, they are not covered by this. So there's no tax on children, but if you're stepchildren, there may be. So just be mindful of that, which is one that can trip people up. Okay, so we covered Iberia, we've covered Spain, Portugal, and Gibraltar. And reality, depending on a few kind of caveats in there, is generally good news. There's not a huge amount of inheritance tax or succession tax, barring maybe some regions in Spain. So that's the good news. Now, the not so good news is UK inheritance tax. So succession tax in Spain, Portugal, Gibraltar is based on where you're resident, where you live. You're a tax resident in one of those countries, which generally means, where you're spending the majority of your time, over 183 days, then you're liable for those taxes in those countries. In the UK, inheritance tax is based on your domicile, not your residency. Now, your domicile is a concept we tend to take on at birth. So it's based on where you're born, where your parents were born. So a typical example, you're born in the UK, your parents were born in the UK, you lived in the UK most of your life, then you will be UK domicile. So when it comes to inheritance tax, regardless of where you're living, you will have to pay UK inheritance tax. Now, it is possible to elect a new domicile, but it's very difficult, it's very unclear, and there's certain conditions. So generally, you have to be out of the UK for at least 6 full tax years. You have to have cut off all ties with the UK, and you need to have clearly established that you've established a new home. So to give an example, if you've got someone who's lived in Portugal for, say, 5 years, then they've moved to Spain, they've lived there for 3 years, they see Spain as their home for the rest of their life, they would still be UK domiciled for sure in that instance, because effectively they've moved to Portugal, but then they've moved to Spain, that the clock resets. HMRC could also argue that, okay, you lived in Portugal for a bit, Spain, but really your true home is the UK. There's also something that they call ties. So if you have ties to the UK, you will retain your UK domicile. This can be something very small, what you would deem insignificant, bank accounts, UK property, family ties. It really, there are other categories that fall into, and there is no assessment as well. There's no way you can say to HMRC, okay, I understand I've lost my UK domicile. Please confirm that to me. They would never do that. So really, the issue we have is that you can never determine definitely you've lost your UK domicile. So our advice is always to plan for the worst rather than hope for the best. And the good news is, as a UK expat, there are planning tools you can use to protect yourself against UK inheritance tax. So if you're an individual who's left the UK, planning to leave the UK, you've looked at your overall wealth and think, okay, yep, I fall under inheritance tax rules. Maybe you're even concerned that there'll be recent changes to inheritance tax. As I'm recording this in September 23, I know that the Conservative Party are looking to make announcements ahead of an election, a potential election. I know there's a lot of concern from people, should maybe a Labour government come in, will they increase inheritance tax? Who knows as we go kind of further down the line. And it depends a lot of things, but you can only kind of plan for your situation now. So our advice really is UK inheritance tax, it is one to be concerned about. You should be taking kind of professional advice on that, but there are ways you can mitigate it with legitimate planning. And those tend to be ways that are available for someone who's now residing outside of the UK that you could take advantage of. So the message today is, if you are in that position, or if generally you want a conversation about your financial planning as an expat, then you are more than welcome to reach out to us. We'd welcome your call or your email. We can set up a no obligation chat and take it from there. So I will add our contact details on the screen now. So you should be able to see that. So Fiduciary Wealth Management, our website is fiduciarywealth.gi. We always say when you're talking to a financial advisor or any other professional, you should do your research on who you're talking to. So feel free to visit our Trustpilot account, Fiduciary Wealth on Trustpilot. If you want to go to our YouTube channel, if you're not there at the moment, there are client testimonial videos that are available on there, so you get a kind of better feel of who we are. And then to contact us, our email is inquiries with an E at fwm.gi, or give us a call on 00350 200 50982. My name is Matt Penfold. Feel free to reach out to me direct, matt.penfold@fwm.gi. So yeah, I say thank you for those who've been watching this webinar, and I look forward to talking to some of you shortly. Goodbye.